everyone for joining us today for the NeedyMeds special topic webinar, Viatical Settlements, a financial option for cancer patients. My name is Carla. I am the Director of Education and Partnerships at NeedyMeds. And before we get started with today's presentation, I just want to go over a few tips. If you have any questions throughout today's presentation, you can feel free to type them into that questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just know we reserve answering questions until the end. If we don't have the time to get to your specific question, we will follow up with you personally via email after the webinar by tomorrow. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the NeedyMeds YouTube page soon. And you can also find copies of today's PowerPoint presentations in that handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have difficulty finding or accessing those, shoot me a message and I'll be happy to email them to you after the presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. For those of you that are not familiar with NeedyMeds, what you're looking at on your screen now is our mission statement. NeedyMeds is a national nonprofit that connects people free and anonymously through a website and helpline to programs that will help them afford their healthcare expenses. Here's a screenshot of our website, and I really always put that up because our website is the face of our organization. Just a couple of things I want to point out because I'm hoping that when you have more time, you will revisit our site. And when you do, you should know that you can find most healthcare savings resources under that patient savings tab. You can find educational resources under the advocates tab. And as I had mentioned, we do record all of our webinars and convert them into videos. So we encourage you to visit, or even better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see a box around that social media icon on the top right of your screen. And on the bottom of the page, you'll see our calendar of events, and that's when you can register for any upcoming webinars you may be interested in. Anyway, you may have noticed on that screen that had the NeedyMeds mission statement that a big part of our mission is education. And we really define education in two ways. One, by educating people about NeedyMeds and the resources we have, but two, by educating people about other resources or topics that they may never have been introduced to and may prove helpful in their life or the life of a loved one, which we are so pleased, which is why we are so pleased to have Lacey Ellison from American Life Fund with us. So let me tell you a little bit about American Life Fund. American Life Fund is an industry-leading Viatical Settlement Company. Founded in 2012, American Life Fund specializes in viatical settlements and has helped hundreds of cancer patients achieve financial freedom by helping them to sell their existing life insurance policy. So that's a little bit about American Life Fund. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest panelist, Lacey, who's going to explain this all to us. Lacey is the marketing director for American Life Fund, a national Atlanta-based viatical settlement company. Lacey has led the marketing department at American Life Fund for 2 years, working with her team to spread awareness on viatical settlements, again, which is a financial option that is really largely unaware to those suffering from a life-threatening illness. I know myself, I had never heard of it. So I'm so glad that Lacey was willing to share her expertise with the NeedyMeds users. So without further ado, I'm going to hopefully seamlessly pass the screen and the mic to Lacey. That may take just a moment. And while Lacey is grabbing that screen and pulling up her PowerPoint presentation, I just want to remind everybody that you can certainly feel free, again, to ask any questions you may have throughout Lacey's presentation by typing them in that question section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Lacey. Enjoy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carla. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Carla mentioned, my name is Lacey Ellison. I'm the marketing director here at American Life Fund, and we are a national viatical settlement company that provides financial assistance to those with a life-threatening illness. And we do this by helping them to sell their life insurance policy. And this is also known as a viatical settlement. As Carla mentioned, it's not a widely known thing. I myself, until I started working at American Life Fund, did not know what a viatical settlement even was. So really the purpose of this webinar today is to learn how viatical settlements can serve as a financial option. So let's go to the next slide. So during this webinar, we will discuss the history of viatical settlements, so how they really came to be established as a financial service. Next, we'll talk about the qualifiers, so who qualifies, how the process works. Then we'll go over some frequently asked questions and some tips for consumers who are wishing to pursue a viatical. Lastly, we're going to talk about some other viable financial options, and that's basically the gist of this webinar and this presentation. So first and foremost, we'll start with the most basic question: what exactly is a viatical settlement? So there are two types of services when someone sells their life insurance policy. There is a life settlement, which is when someone who is typically a senior individual, so they're usually 70 years or older, that's when they sell their life insurance policy to a third party for more than the surrender value, but less than the face value. So when I say surrender value, I am referring to if you decided to cancel your policy, this is the amount your insurance company would give you in return, which is usually a small portion of the face value. So that is what the cash surrender value is. And then the face value is the amount of your life insurance policy. So if you took out a $200,000 life insurance policy on yourself, that $200,000 is the face value, or how much is paid out from the life insurance company if you were, upon your passing. So that's a life settlement. Then there is viatical settlements, which are a type of life settlement, but for someone who has a life-threatening illness such as cancer, ALS, or Alzheimer's. So since a lot of people don't even know what that viatical settlements even exist, their next question usually is, when did they begin? So life settlements first became legal all the way back in 1911 when the Supreme Court ruled that anything you own, including life insurance policies, had the ability to be sold. However, viatical settlements and life settlements weren't really prominent until the late 1980s, and that's when the HIV/AIDS epidemic happened in the US, and that's really when they became an in-demand financial service. So even though viatical settlements have been around more than a century, they really haven't been an in-demand service until that time, some 70 years later. So the next question I kind of want to go over is, how are viaticals legal, which is a big question we get a lot. So as we learned in the previous slide, viatical settlements were born and became legalized all the way back in the early 1900s. So they are in fact a legal financial service. Today, the majority of U.S. states have regulations in place for viatical settlements, and this means that every state in the U.S. can practice viatical settlements, but 45 of those states have actual laws in place that outline the specifics of how that transaction must take place. And this is a really good thing for consumers because these regulations are in place to protect them. That's why it's important to do your research beforehand and see if your state is regulated for a viatical settlement and what those regulations are, to make sure the company you choose is abiding by those regulations, and to just have as much information as possible. So now we're going to talk about who qualifies for a viatical settlement. So really there are two main qualifiers. So in order to qualify for a viatical settlement, you must have a life-threatening diagnosis. As I mentioned, that is either cancer, ALS, or Alzheimer's, and you also must have an existing life insurance policy. Our personal minimum is $100,000, but that varies across companies. So every company is completely different in terms of their minimum face value. That is just ours, but that seems to be pretty standard across the board. That's usually the minimum, but like I said, it does vary, and also the diagnosis can vary because we've seen things like heart disease and heart issues. So those are also, it's just a case-by-case basis. So, but for the majority, these are the types of diagnoses, and this is the minimum face value that we see as a qualifier for a viatical settlement. Next, we're going to talk about, what do people use the funds for when they pursue a viatical settlement? So why are people going after a viatical settlement? What are they using that money for? So one of the main things we see is a lot of people use it to assist with large healthcare costs. And as we know, with a life-threatening illness, that gets very, very expensive. Medical costs are steadily on the rise. They increase every single year, and health insurance only covers certain costs. So that leaves the rest of these expenses for the patient to cover, and it gets very costly. So this is why financial assistance for these patients is needed now more than ever. So another reason we see is a lot of people use it for living expenses. A lot of patients are too sick to work, and they need some way to make up for that loss of income. Their loved ones also may have had to quit their jobs or take time away from work to care for them, and that depletes their income even more. So living expenses is also a really big reason we see people pursue viatical settlements. Also, another reason is a lot of patients seek to do alternative treatment. They have exhausted traditional treatment. So alternative treatment may be the next step for them, and it could be a life-saving move for them. And a lot of people can't afford those costs, and their insurance may not cover it. So that's another big reason we see people do a viatical settlement. And some people just really want to take, a really nice trip with their loved ones, with their friends and family that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. Some people just want to pay off their debt and their bills and not have, that kind of dark cloud hanging over them. So these are just different reasons people typically get a viatical settlement. These are the typical reasons they use those funds for. And usually a viatical settlement is substantial enough to cover many of these expenses. So how does a viatical settlement work? So a lot of work goes into viatical settlements with a company on the back end that the consumer doesn't really see. But from the consumer perspective, there are 5 steps that outline what this process looks like. So first, you research and you find a company you like and feel comfortable working with. That is the first step. So find a company, get online, search, ask for referrals, find a company you really like to work with. Second, you need to submit your information. So you're going to submit whatever required information they ask for. That usually entails an application and any life policy details or recent medical records you have on hand. The company then examines and verifies your information, and then the next step is they determine an offer, and they present that offer to you based off of your health information and your policy information. The next step is going to be policy ownership and beneficiary changes are made. So what this means is when a company purchases a life insurance policy from someone, they then become the owner and the beneficiary of that policy. So that means they're responsible for all future premium payments. The policy is then in their name, and they also receive the proceeds of and has the beneficiary. So that means that we need to make those changes. So what happens is the company gets in touch with your life insurance company, and they make the official changes via the contract that you signed, transferring ownership to the company. And once those changes are made, the previous insured person receives a lump sum payment. So the company then sends that person a payment for the offer amount that they presented and was accepted. And that's basically the 5-step process in a nutshell. So now I want to talk about some frequently asked questions. So there's a lot of questions people have when they first are looking into viatical settlements. So here are a couple of the main ones that I want to go through. So one of the first ones is, what personal information do I have to share? Especially in this day and age, people are very protective of their personal information with identity theft and all of those different things, and information is now more available than ever. So what information do you have to share when you're pursuing a viatical settlement, and how is it protected? So when you receive the initial application, that's one of the first steps. You generally fill out a basic personal information application that has your contact information, that has general information on your policy, your diagnosis, and then any of the doctors you have recently seen. Included with that initial application is usually a HIPAA form. So the reason that there's usually a HIPAA form involved that you must sign is because it allows the company to reach out to doctors on your behalf so they can retrieve any medical records that they need during that medical review stage. So a lot of people don't have their medical records on hand, so this allows the company to get those records on their behalf and kind of save the person the trouble of having to contact their doctors and get all that information themselves. It allows the company to do that, and it also protects that information and ensures that the company keeps it confidential and secure. So another question that a lot of people ask is, how is my offer determined? How does that company get to that final dollar amount that they offer someone? So many factors are taken into account, but the main ones include your diagnosis type, your diagnosis staging, what your policy is worth, and the premiums you pay on that policy. So how do these four main factors increase or decrease the offer amount that a company gives you? So as we know, there are so many different types of cancers and serious illnesses, and they are not all treated the same. For example, a patient with stage 2 breast cancer is going to be treated very different than someone with stage 2 lung cancer because of the degree of seriousness between the two cancer types. So this is because the life expectancy and remission rate are very different for both of these types of cancer. So they're going to be treated very differently. Therefore, the life expectancy, which is calculated by the person's based on the person's diagnosis and their staging, plays a large part in the offer amount because the company has to determine how much premiums are they projected to pay on this policy. And that is a lot of that goes back to the life expectancy of the person. Another big factor is the face value of the policy, because as the face value increases, normally does the return on that policy. So the larger the face value, that definitely tends to increase the offer amount. The more serious the stage and type of illness, that tends to increase the offer amount. And also premiums play a large role as well. So if you have very inexpensive premiums, that could heavily increase your offer because it's less the company is going to have to pay into that policy and more they can give back to you. Likewise, if your premiums are very expensive, that is also a factor they have to take into account, and it can decrease your final offer amount. So those are the main things that go into an offer amount. And every company has a different calculator they use for this, a different algorithm they use for this, but the majority are going to come out of the offers are going to come out very similar because they're using the same main factors to calculate that offer. So the next question we're going to address are the funds that you receive from a Viatical tax-free? So that's a really big question because people want to know how much of the large amount of funds are actually going to have to be taxable. So the funds you receive from a Viatical settlement, in short, are not taxable. However, which is a really great thing about Viatical settlements. However, there is a caveat here. So the government does define a Viatical settlement as someone who has a predicted life expectancy of 24 months or less. So that is their definition of a Viatical settlement. So in order to be deemed a Viatical settlement in the government's eyes, you must have written record from either a doctor or a life expectancy company that you have a projected life expectancy of 24 months or less for the funds to be deemed tax-free by the government. However, if your life expectancy is projected to be longer than that amount of time, you can still participate in a Viatical settlement, but your funds may be subject to taxation. So it's really important to keep this in mind when you're pursuing a Viatical settlement, just to make sure you know beforehand if your funds are going to be taxed or not. You can take that into account. We always advise people, it's really good to have a really knowledgeable tax advisor on hand so they can kind of guide you with tax advice on that and let you know what to expect come tax season if you were to complete a Viatical settlement. So another question I wanted to talk about is a lot of people ask, if I sell my life insurance policy, am I going to be able to get another one because I'm not in great health? So what does that mean for me? The short answer is no. Most life insurance providers are not going to provide a life insurance policy to someone who's already been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. So unless that person has been in remission for a certain period of time, and even then they can still sometimes deny a life insurance policy to someone. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind. If you do a Viatical settlement, just know that there's a possibility you may not be able to get another life insurance policy. So just something to keep in mind. Another question people want to know is, how are my government benefits affected? So a lot of people, especially people with a serious illness, may be receiving Social Security benefits such as disability. Some people may be on welfare. There is a possibility that these benefits could be at risk if you do a Viatical settlement, and that is just because the government does take those Viatical settlement funds into account as income. So if they see that you are receiving so much income with that increase of funds from the Viatical settlement, it may put those things at risk. So that is also something you do want to look into if you do use, government benefits when looking into a Viatical settlement. Just make sure you know how is that going to affect those benefits. So another question people want to know is, what happens if I decide to cancel? So what happens if I do a Viatical settlement and I decide, you know what, this really isn't for me? Either you have another source of income come through that kind of covers whatever cost you initially were trying to cover with a Viatical settlement, or maybe you're just like, you know what, I really want to hold on to my life insurance policy. I'm really not sure that I want to sell it at this time. So there is a way that you can cancel your policy even after you have received funds, which is the final step of the Viatical settlement process. So it's typically stated in your contract that time period, but it's typically 15 days from when you receive funds or 30 days from when the contract was signed. So that's that final contract. Whenever that was signed, if that's 30 days from that or 15 days from when you receive funds, whichever of those dates occurs sooner, that is your cancellation period. So during that time, you have the right, based on your contract, to cancel the Viatical settlement, and you get your life insurance policy back in your name and you return the funds. And so there's definitely a way to cancel if you decide it's not for you and you change your mind after you've already proceeded with the Viatical settlement. So now I want to talk about some consumer tips, some things that might help you if you're looking into a Viatical settlement and you want to know some tips for how to make sure you have the best experience possible. So we've already discussed how a company calculates an offer amount, but a question that comes up a lot is, how do I know that offer I'm given is fair? Really, it's hard to know unless you have something to compare that to. So therefore, reaching out to a few different companies to get comparisons is very helpful. It helps you know what kind of range your offer may fall in. Every company is going to be different, but the offer amount should be somewhat close to one another. So reaching out to a few different companies, getting a couple different ballpark offer amounts is a really good way to figure out kind of what you should expect in terms of offer and to know that the offer you were initially given was fair. It's also important to note that in the beginning, you're giving this initial offer amount based on the details that you provide up front. But however, once that company goes into your policy information and they further examine your medical records, that initial offer amount may increase or decrease just depending on what they find during that examination period. So that's just something important to know, that that initial amount that's given is not always the amount that is given at the end. It could go up or down just depending on what you may find, what the company may find when they examine your information a little further. Also, it's good to have a couple of questions on hand to ask a company when they give you an offer, when you're asking what that offer may be. So ask, what is the typical offer for a case such as mine? So again, you can get that kind of average. And then what unique factors about my case could change this average? So those are good questions to ask. Instead of just getting that offer amount and then running with it, make sure you ask some questions so you can set your expectations and know that it could go up, it could go down, and why. Another tip is, how can you speed up the process? A lot of people that are pursuing Viatical settlements, they need funds and they need them now. So how can we make sure that this is a quick and smooth process? The number one tip I would give someone is make sure that you keep that open line of communication with the company you're working with, because one of the main factors in how quickly the process goes is based on how responsive and timely that client is. Because people who are in a Viatical settlement tend to not be in the best health. They are busy with treatment and appointments and everything else that comes with a life-threatening illness. But keeping in touch with your company point of contact and getting those required documents into them in a timely manner really makes the difference. So I would say just be very responsive, and you can move the process as quickly as you would like based on that. And typically the process, just to give you kind of an idea of how long it normally takes, it can go as fast as 1 week, and that's 1 week funds in your hands within a week, and that's also could be a few months, just like I said, based on how responsive and timely you are, and then also obviously the company, how timely and responsive they are as well. So another consumer tip I have for you is how to determine if a company is ethical. When you are dealing with a big decision like selling your life insurance policy, you want to make sure the company you're working with is reputable. So there are a few ways you can do this. The first way is seeing if they are a member of an association called the Life Insurance Settlement Association, and this is also known as LISA. So the members of LISA are various life and settlement entities, and by becoming a member, they're vowing to abide by that organization's code of ethics. So that code of ethics says that they must act with integrity, professionalism, and put the interests of their clients above their own personal interests. And if any member of LISA breaks those codes, they are reprimanded by that organization. So being a member of LISA is something to look out for when you're looking at different companies. That's definitely something you want to look for. Another way to really tell if a company is credible is to kind of do your research, look online at their reviews, and see how people are rating them, and also ask for references from past clients, because that gives you a good firsthand account of what it's like to work with that company. So those are the 2 tips I would give you for how to determine if a company that you're working with is ethical, which is really important. The next slide we're going to talk about, so we've talked a lot about viatical settlements, but I want to talk about a few other options, because viatical settlements are not for everyone, and maybe that you want to look at a few other options instead and kind of, weigh your options and see what is best for you. So a few different things that you can do. The number one thing I would say is a loan. So if you need a large amount of financial assistance, loans may be a good option. There are a few different types of loans that you can get. So there's a second mortgage. You can also take out life insurance, a life insurance loan. So there are certain companies that will let you take a loan out on your life insurance, meaning you don't have to sell your policy. You can just take out a loan on a portion of that policy and then pay that back later at a different time. But the biggest caveat to loans, I would say, is that, obviously at some point you have to pay that money back. So just make sure you plan, you have a plan in place on how you're going to do that, because you just don't want to add, onto your debt if you don't have a plan in the future on how you're going to pay that back. So I would definitely say loans can be a really good option. You can also do a personal loan, obviously. So these are a few good ways that you can take out a loan to help you with any expenses you have. Another really great option is nonprofit organizations. So we have a lot of people that come to us. They may not be qualified for a viatical settlement, or it may not be something they necessarily want to do. And the first place we point them is towards nonprofit organizations, because they are a really great resource, financial and otherwise. So there's a few different ways you can go about it. So there's a lot of nonprofits that are specific to your diagnosis. So there's a lot of cancer specific nonprofits that are really great, because they really specialize in the type of cancer or diagnosis that you have. So that's a really great option. They have so many different resources, so many different types of financial resources and otherwise. And so I would definitely, do your research, find some nonprofits either specific to your diagnosis, or even there's ones that are just for diagnoses in general, such as the American Cancer Society. So that would be for all types of cancer. Or if you have a specific type of cancer, like you have colorectal cancer, the Colorectal Cancer Alliance is a really great organization. So look at some nonprofits specific to your diagnosis, or ones that are more general. They're really great options. There's also nonprofits that are specific to certain kinds of financial assistance. So there's just kind of to bring it around full circle, obviously NeedyMeds is a really great nonprofit organization that helps with healthcare expenses. So if you have a specific kind of expense that you're trying to get financial assistance for, look out for those specific nonprofit organizations that help with that specific type of financial care. So I would say those are some really great options that you can also pursue outside of a viatical settlement. And now that's the end of my kind of viatical settlements 101, and now we're kind of onto the Q&A part.
Lacey, thank you so much for the very thorough and, more importantly, easy explanation of what viatical settlements are. I was in that category of people that didn't know what it was, and when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is not going to be something I'm going to be able to get my head around easily. So from the moment I had my first introductory conversation with Lacey, I thought, oh, she makes this sound very simple, very straightforward, and more importantly, very transparent. And that's why we thought it was a great it would be a great resource for NeedyMeds users to simply be aware of. So thank you for that, and I'm going to encourage everybody, once again, I do see some questions coming in, and we'll get to those in just a moment, but if you do have questions, again, a reminder that you can type them into that question section of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to take just a moment to highlight what Lacey just said a moment ago, that if you are having trouble affording your healthcare expenses, we do hope that you turn to NeedyMeds. Certainly, we're not the panacea for all financial woes, but our goal is to help connect you with a program that will help you save on or afford your healthcare expenses. And what you're looking at on your screen is simply a snapshot of our most popular and cost-effective healthcare savings program. So I encourage you to, again, visit needymeds.org or call our expert call center counselors, and that's at 1-800-503-6897. And of course, I'll have that contact information as well as the contact information for American Life Fund up at the end of the presentation. Just a reminder that we do our best to populate the NeedyMeds calendar of events, and again, that's on the bottom right hand of our homepage, with webinar topics that we think our users would be interested in. They're always free, so we do hope you find ones that you're interested in. Be vocal if there's a specific topic or diagnosis you're interested in learning more about. And again, we'll do our best to find an expert on that topic and schedule a webinar. Of course, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, if you miss a webinar and would like to view it, or like today, if you joined us for a webinar and you say, I really have patients or loved ones that would be interested in learning about this, we do convert all of our webinars into videos to be posted onto the NeedyMeds YouTube channel. So as promised, as I ask Lacey some of the questions that are coming in, there's the contact information for American Life Fund should you have additional questions, as well as NeedyMeds. So Lacey, one question coming in, and this is a great one. Do I have to sell all of my policy, or can I just sell a portion of it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. So we talked a little bit about loans, but is there another option outside of selling all of your policy, doing a loan on a portion of it? So there's one other option that some people choose to pursue, and that's called a back end. So what a back end is when you have the company hold on to a portion of your policy, and you can choose how much that is and who it goes to, who your beneficiary is. So upon the insured's passing, that amount can go to the beneficiary. So that's a great way that some people may say, I don't want to sell all of my policy, I don't want to do a loan, but I do want to hold on to a portion of it for the intended original use, which was to give that money to a certain beneficiary. So that's a really great option that a lot of people choose to pursue. So definitely something you should ask someone if you're working with a company, do you do a back end agreement where I can hold on to some of my policy? A lot of companies will work with you and they will allow that to happen. So just something to be aware of.
That's a great question, and thanks to our audience member for voicing that concern, because I always feel like if one person asks it, there must be other people thinking it. Another great question coming in is, my life insurance policy is through my job. Can I sell it?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. So yeah, you absolutely can is the short answer for that. These types of policies are actually called group policies. So the only caveat with this is that the person would need to be separated from their employer. So that would be either through retirement, either you left of your own accord or were let go. So once you're separated from your employer, you can then convert that group policy to a personal life insurance policy, and that allows you to proceed with a viatical settlement. So yes, but you must be separated in order for that policy to be converted for a viatical settlement.
Thanks, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another good question. Can I call American Life Fund if I have more questions? And if I do that, is there a fee?
Yeah, that's a great one. So a lot of people, I think, are hesitant to even reach out to companies such as ours because they're afraid they're going to be locked in or have to pay something. But our thing is no cost, no obligation. If you call, a lot of people call just with initial questions, and it's absolutely free. We have free consultations like most companies. So if you call us and just simply want more information, we are more than happy to provide that, and it costs absolutely nothing to you.
Thank you again to our audience member for asking that, and to Lacey and American Life Fund for being willing to have that conversation. As you had said in the beginning of the presentation, this is a heavy decision to make.
Mhm.
It could feel complicated, and it could feel like you're taking a big step. And certainly, after one webinar or one conversation or getting a few quick questions answered, you might not feel comfortable or confident enough to take the next step. So I think it's really gives me peace of mind that American Life Fund is willing to have a consultation and answer some questions to put the person's mind at ease. And obviously there's no rush as far as the company goes. It's completely on the individual's timeline. So with that, we do see other questions coming in, so I apologize that we're not going to get a chance to answer those additional questions. Just a reminder that we haven't forgotten about you, though. We will follow up with you personally via email after the webinar by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. But if those questions need to be answered in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to American Life Fund or NeedyMeds directly. If I haven't beaten you over the head enough with this, I will remind you that today's presentation is being converted into a video and will be on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel for further viewing, and so you can share it. Thanks so much to our audience for taking time out of a busy day to learn a little bit more about viatical settlements, and thanks so much to our guest panelist, Lacey, for sharing her expertise with the NeedyMeds audience. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.